hey, why don't we call it a big spring sale? They're basically doing a week-long Prime Day at the end of March. So it starts March 25th, runs through the 31st. Do you have product? And is that product already in Amazon? On top of that, do you have enough inventory to sustain any sales gains you might get from big spring sale, like the one that we're about to have?
Have you heard of the Prime Big Spring Sale? Well, if you haven't, you should have, and you should be prepping for it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is how to prep for, kind of these big sale events, what things you should watch out for, the things that you should make sure you account for, because while it's very easy to make fantastic sales during these big sale events, oftentimes they eat into profits. So you want to make sure that you're actually making money at the end of the day, which is why I'm going to be going through this strategy with my good friend, Sean Stone. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me back, actually.
Yes, absolutely. We recorded another really great episode on how you're using AI to help rank. So I'll definitely have to link that in the description. But do you want to just quickly go over what the spring sale even is? Because it seems a little last minute, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously this is an opportunity, but we also need to treat it with a little bit of conservatism, because this is something that Amazon clearly just kind of threw together. They decided, hey, why don't we call it a big spring sale? They're basically doing a week-long Prime Day at the end of March. So it starts March 25th, runs through the 31st. In my opinion, it's a pretty transparent effort from them to try to just grow their sales right before the end of Q1, grow their Q1 results. And so they put together a bunch of stuff and they haven't even really told sellers very much about it. They just said like, hey, there is going to be a Prime Big sale. Communication hasn't been great. Most shoppers have no idea this is coming. My wife shops religiously and she has no idea this is coming. So more than anything, I think that this is something that Amazon's kind of throwing together. I don't feel like they've done a great job of communicating it. That could also be the plan. They might just be trying to capitalize on last minute sales without giving any kind of signal to the market beforehand that there's going to be a sale. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. It feels like that's kind of Amazon's MO. Like I know with their Prime Day sales and stuff, like they do very heavy advertising pushes, but that does like they don't actually like announce the days till very last minute. Now, from my understanding, that is strategic because you have all of the other platforms that immediately hop on the bandwagon, be like, all right, now we have our sale days. So I feel like it's a little bit of that. And then it also feels very, very similar to when Amazon first rolled out their fall Prime Day. There was the general sentiment, I think, both in the seller and the shopper community of like, wow, this feels like a last minute cash grab. Like, what is going on? And then the weird thing enough, though, is that as Amazon has remained consistent with it, we've seen very good numbers on past fall Prime Days, where before it felt like it was this afterthought and like summer Prime Day was like the pillar. It almost feels like they're doing, okay, it's like now they have the summer Prime Day and the fall Prime Day. Now they're adding in a spring. To be honest, I feel like it has the potential to be a solid sales event. Maybe not this year, but my guess is if it's successful at all, they'll probably end up incorporating it very similarly to the fall Prime Day. That's just speculation.
I would agree. Generally speaking, when Amazon does run sales, they do end up getting a lot of traffic and a lot of interest. They're great at media. So, 2 days before this, I can be on CNBC and all the other major publications. So I do think that this actually could be a good opportunity. But I think we should define what a good opportunity is, because the other thing you got to remember is one of Amazon's most profitable divisions in their company, aside from AWS, which I think is just like gangbusters profitability, is Amazon advertising. And it's a growing profitable section of their business. So they're probably seeing this as a huge opportunity to get more ad dollars. And so one of the main things I wanted everyone to take away from this is don't spend a crazy amount of money on Prime Day or Prime Big Spring Sale if you can't afford it or it doesn't make sense for your business. This is an opportunity to make profit. This is an opportunity to liquidate products. That's the way that we've been thinking about it, at least.
Yeah, that's very similar to the way that we think about it as well, because as you said, advertising can get way more expensive. And then even if CPCs don't go up, which I expect them to, just the sheer amount of clicks that are happening can easily deplete budgets within hours. So I love that you set up the conversation like that. Let's talk through sort of, we were talking before this, like you had like 4 pillars that you think through when it comes to sort of crafting a successful Prime Big Spring sale.
Yeah, the way we think about it is we use the acronym PAIR, AIR. We don't always implement it in that order, but it stands for promotions, ads, inventory, and rankability. And so that's the way that we try to think through many of the Amazon advertising or Amazon sales opportunities. And this one's no different. So traditionally, we like to start with inventory whenever there's a flagpole day, because inventory kind of drives everything else into this specific section. So
Right. I
you want to
mean,
start there?
you're not going to make sales if you don't have products to sell. So that's, I think, the best place to start. So
Mhm.
how do you go about thinking through inventory positions? Is there certain things that you check?
Yeah. So obviously, do you have product? And is that product already in Amazon? Because that's a very important thing. And then on top of that, do you have enough inventory to sustain any sales gains you might get
Mhm.
from a big spring sale like the one that we're about to have? So if you're about to go out of stock and you're not going to get new stock until April 15th, you
Mhm.
probably don't want to do anything special. You might even want to cut back on
Yeah.
your promotional and advertising efforts going into this big spring sale, because it's just going to be hard to keep that inventory in stock if you're just, there are timelines that you can't get around. The other
Absolutely.
thing that's important to think about is your margin. So, like, quantity of inventory is one thing, but also if you look at your inventory, what margin you're making on average for each unit sold after fees, ads, everything else, and kind of think to yourself, like, is this a product that we could really benefit from pushing and taking advantage of some kind of flagpole day? So we kind of
Mhm.
think about inventory from like a holistic perspective, like how does it fit into the general strategy that we're trying to implement on Amazon when there's more traffic and higher buyer intent.
Yeah, that's a great call. So another question for you would be, what about items that you're overstocked on? And I'm sure we can probably segment that as we go through. But I think one of the most difficult things is oftentimes the overstock items are overstocked because of low conversion rates. Like they just don't move very quickly, or they are the lower profit items. So you're not pushing as hard on advertising. Is that something? Do you see these kind of days? Obviously, margins are going to go down if you're running advertising on something that doesn't have as high profits, but kind of chicken and the egg, storage fees versus lower margins as you try and get rid of stock. Is that something you also take into account?
Yeah. So just in general, we are always looking at inventory position to make sure that we are in a healthy place. Or if the client's about to start getting hit with storage fees or long-term storage fees, we really want to start thinking about what we can do to start maximizing that inventory. Because sometimes the cheapest thing you can do is liquidate it. Sometimes the
Mhm.
cheapest thing you can do is sell the product at a loss, but try to
Mhm.
recover the entire cost of goods sold in your Amazon payout. It's not something we like to do, but
Mhm.
it's something that
Right.
we will do if we are maybe in an overstock position. There are a bunch of different things that you can kind of think about. Maybe we have a little section about it. Maybe we talk about it now. Maybe we talk about it at the end. But clearing stock is definitely something you can use a flagpole day for. You need a specific strategy, but if you do it right, it definitely can work.
Yeah, maybe let's dive into that specific strategy, and because I mean we have those other sections in sort of that pair acronym. So we went over the inventory first, which I agree with you. I think that's the best place to start because you can start
Mhm.
planning promotions and get it to inventory, be like, oh, whoops, I didn't need to do that. And
Yeah.
so in that next section, you also go through like promotions often as your next step. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so when it comes to promotions, once you know if you have a product that can sell or
Hmm.
that you can sell because you have inventory or you're overstocked, and then you have the margin to do it, because there's no point in running a 10, 15, 20% off discount if your margin is 10, 15, or 20%.
Right.
Then once you've gone through those two things, the next thing you want to do is figure out, okay, well, what's my promotional strategy? Because a lot of sellers, especially sellers who haven't been on the Amazon platform for that long, one of the things they think about is like, oh, we're giving away that much margin just right off the top. We're going to
Right.
lose money. But the counterpoint to that is actually your conversion rates are going to increase by such a drastic amount that often you still come out ahead from both a total profit perspective, but often a margin perspective. Like sometimes we've had Prime days where it's like the highest margin day of the year, which
Right.
seems so crazy when you're giving away 20% of the product price.
Yeah. I like that you earmarked that 20%. And again, it seems like you and I are both sort of going through this like, okay, Prime Big Spring Sale, brand new territory, technically speaking, but we can sort of draw insights from traditional Prime days and fall Prime days and sort of apply that. And I know one of the things, at least we've seen, and I believe you have as well, when it comes to those events is that products that are not running deals, like you will see a lift if you're not running a deal or a coupon of some kind. But what we've
Mhm.
seen is that you're going to have like a significantly lower lift. Like you might get some of the residual traffic, but you're just not going to have the same increase in sales. And I think we have seen that something about at least a 20% seems to be, and I believe maybe it's also if you wanted to run a Prime coupon, isn't it like required 20% or something like that as well?
So they decide to make it 15% for this event, which is kind of strange. But generally speaking, most Prime days, it's if you want to do a Prime exclusive discount, you must do
Yeah.
20% or you don't get any badging. Coupons, I think it's a similar outcome, but you do
Mhm.
have a little bit more flexibility. I don't think they have the same price threshold requirements. Like you can run
Mhm.
a 20% off coupon and get a badge, but it doesn't have to be as low of a price. Something to that
Yeah.
effect. Again, if I'm talking out of turn here, apologies. But the general theme is coupons, discounts. Amazon knows that shoppers have a hard time trusting discounts on the internet. And so they want them
Mhm.
to be real. They want to
Yeah.
actually be able to see that this is a real discount.
Got it. Okay. So when you're thinking through that, are you kind of using that benchmark of like, the 15 to 20%? Because again, what we have seen is that if you can get that specific deal badging, I'm trying to remember the naming they have on it for like Prime days, but it's like Prime Day discounts or, it's calling out the specific sale. There is a marked improvement in conversion rates for products that have that badging. And so are you kind of just, again, you're looking, already figured out inventory, you already figured out margins. Are you also looking at that, 15 to 20% and say, is there anything left over if I was going to apply this to the product, looking at the current profitability?
Yeah, we're always looking because we don't want to run a discount on a product that has a 10% net margin.
Right.
Or if we do, we want to severely restrict ads and see if the deal and the deal badge can do the advertising for us. We
Mhm.
maybe would just only run ads on the highest profit product or highest profit campaigns in the account and see if we
Mhm.
can just kind of make out like a bandit by spending less than we would or than Amazon would expect us to.
Got it. Okay, that makes total sense. And I think that's a really great transition into the advertising. So I know there are certain key things. Again, we're both, I think, drawing learnings from what we've been through. At this point, I feel like a veteran from Prime days, old school. Everyone's like, just increase everything. It's Prime Day. Like these days it's more expensive. You got to get more savvy. But there are some, just really good rules of thumb. One that I love you is like less focused on adjusting bids, more focused on adjusting budgets. I know that's something that we lean into as well and have found works really well.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that if you're focusing on profit, then you probably want to raise budgets a little bit more selectively than you might
Mhm.
otherwise.
Yeah.
So, and we are jumping ahead here, but I've never seen a product sustain like a really, really great long term ranking that they've gained from a Prime Day
Mhm.
because conversion rates kind of fall back or revert to the mean once, 4 or 5 days have passed.
Yeah.
So I generally speaking don't try to scale my ranking campaigns and increase the budgets on those as much as I
Mhm.
would focus on increasing the budgets on my most profitable campaigns.
Got it.
So, maybe I'll increase my ranking campaigns by 20% or some other benchmark that we agree to with the client. But when it comes to the actual best campaigns, things like catch all campaigns and stuff like that, those are the ones that we want to scale because there's a huge influx in traffic. And there's
Mhm.
also just a really, really meaningful amount of conversion happening. So if you can
Mhm.
get as many cheap clicks as you can on a campaign that's historically proven itself to be effective, and it doesn't have to be a catch-all campaign. It could be a just winning keywords campaign. It could be a broad match campaign. It could be anything. But the general idea is if you have campaigns that are really, really performing for you, but they just maybe don't have enough scale, this is a great day to test what that scale might be.
No, I love that. And one other tip that actually smarter minds than me, I have some really amazing people on my team. One of the things that we've kind of rolled out across as like a really solid strategy is we'll have the budget discussion before heading into any sale. You know, again, if it's your own account, you should know what kind of budgets you're comfortable increasing. If it's a client relationship, like what we deal with, there's obviously a conversation that needs to happen. And so off of that conversation, we typically go, okay, so we're comfortable doing X. If you have an idea of what you might potentially see in terms of increases for sales, which again, when you're coming to a place like this, like it's difficult to know. Like we know what happens in fall Prime Day. You can maybe take a small portion of that and increase it. But if you have that benchmark of sales and then you say have a total A cost target, it's very easy to say, okay, I expect this sales. I want this kind of total A cost. There we go. This is my budget. Okay, what's the difference between my current budget and that budget? Great. Now I have my new budget. That would be the way I would calculate, or we do often with clients when there's some uncertainty of, I don't know how much should I raise it. It's like, well, we kind of expect this. But the one thing that we'll actually do is we'll take that additional budget, and it's probably more important during Prime Day where you have like 2 days. So it's like a very concentrated. We'll probably test it and see how this works because this is like a longer, like what is it, a week long sale?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is we'll take that additional budget. Say we have an additional, I don't know, let's say $500 of budget a day.
Yeah.
A little bit high, but all right, let's just go with that. And then we say, okay, we have what's half of 500 would be 350. So what we'll do is we'll add that additional 350 towards the beginning of the day. So either by increasing campaign budgets, or if we have a budget cap on the account, then we'll do it that way. I know a lot of people don't like budget caps. If you manage for client accounts, you need to be careful of the spend. I'll just say they're a great fail safe. Let's just put it that way. And so what you can actually do is, because spend and sales and stuff inside the ad console is not real time, but you can see when that budget runs out. However, if you go into business reports, not vendor accounts, but if you have like a 3P, you can actually see real-time sales. So what you can do is, if you're expecting X% increase throughout the day, you can take a look at, okay, so about halfway through the day or wherever I'm at, have my sales increased at a rate that I was forecasting? And if they have, then you can be very confident in adding additional budget and knowing that you should be pacing towards your total A cost goals. Again, it's a bit like feeling your way through the dark, but you're at least directionally correct. And you have a little bit more certainty that, okay, the goalpost is in that direction versus that one. But that's actually been really helpful when it comes to like understanding, should we be pacing budgets? Because again, inside ad console, same day, you feel like you're flying blind, but you can actually use it benchmarking off of sales data, which is real time, which we found helpful.
Yeah, that's a really helpful way to think about it. I'll be stealing that. Thank you. You use the word benchmarking. I think benchmarking is the perfect way to put it. What happened on your last fall Prime Day? What happened on your last, actually fall Prime Day is probably the best comparison. If you can't use that, then I guess you should use the July Prime Day. But the whole situation is going to be so different because they're testing a longer date range. It's 7 days instead of 2. But if you expect that over the same period of time, you're going to see a 2x in sales, then you probably want to 2x your budget. But you also want to consider the fact that when there's higher intent on Amazon, you do also get a higher percentage of organic sales. That's something that we found to be really, really nice about these deals is, you still, assuming you do have decent organic ranking, this is a good opportunity for you to take advantage of all that ranking you've built up over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I feel like, did we touch enough on the advertising, or do we want to leave on the note opportunity of profits and liquidation?
So there are a couple of things I want to just mention when it comes to advertising. Depending on whether you have a product that is what we call rankable, but basically a product that gets a lot of organic ranking and kind of gets a good percentage of their sales from organic, that kind of product should have one playbook where, you raise your budgets maybe a little bit more carefully on some of the ranking campaigns, and then your more loose match or your highly profitable campaigns, you keep budgets higher there. For products that are kind of on the other end of the spectrum, which we might call incremental, which are products that are heavily reliant on advertising, those products would benefit a lot more from increased budgets. So what we've often found is we'll try to divide the two and then kind of apply the playbook that makes more sense to each of them. So generally speaking, we'll run promotions on both types of products, but then products that are rankable, we kind of restrict budgets and try to let the deal badge do the work for us.
Mhm.
And then for what are more incremental products, we're really looking for every opportunity to spend cheaply and effectively on the platform to get those cheap sales while they're there.
I like the differentiation there because I think that's really helpful. So I think this is kind of coming back full circle to like the original conversation where we started was like, all right, be careful of profits because when you're talking deals plus advertising plus everything else in inventory, like it's so easy. And I think back in the day before everything was hitting the bottom line. Now with the fees and the inventory fees and, shipping being difficult, and then we add tariffs in onto that, it's like there's way more margins to play with these days. And so you got to run a tight ship. I feel like 4 years ago, people were like, slap a deal on it. Everything's good, right? Like we don't really have to worry about it because the margins are so fat. We run it a little tight and we go whoops, but at least we still made money. Like these days you have a whoops and like there's a potential to be out of business if you're not careful enough. So you definitely have to make sure. So I appreciate you starting off the conversation with that of making sure. And then, like you said, if it is sort of that liquidation opportunity, you might be factoring in, okay, at the very least, I'm getting costs back, because if I factor in at least the time it would take me, even if I lower my sales price all the way down to cost, I could end up being backwards at the end. So just really taking a hard look. It sounds like mostly at the bottom line, taking a really hard look at inventory in the bottom line and almost like letting that dictate strategy mostly.
Yeah. I mean, if you treat this as a profit first event, then you should start with where are the biggest profit levers in this business.
Yeah.
That's why we start there, because we like it when people make money. So we try to do that. That's generally a best practice that we're working on. When it comes to liquidations, a couple of things you want to keep in mind is you should probably set some kind of goal first. Like selling on Amazon does have a lot of similarities to gambling, and I don't gamble at all. So I keep making gambling references, but I have no concept of what you're supposed to do. But I think what you're supposed to do is set some kind of budget. Like you're looking to achieve X or Y, and if it doesn't happen, you stop. And so when you're looking at a liquidation event, you might be saying to yourself, okay, my goal is X. My goal is to recover my cost of goods sold for each unit from the actual payout. My goal is to get this inventory down to zero without losing money on the SKU from a payout perspective. My goal is to make $4 back on top of cost of goods sold on the product, usually for more expensive products, but like that's kind of the way that you should set some kind of goal, and then you should try to reverse engineer your way into that. One of the things that we've seen work really well when it comes to liquidation is a lot of the times a product ends up in a liquidation situation when the market shifts and other sellers find a way to sell something much cheaper than the product you're selling. So say you were selling a garlic press for $29.99. And then somebody else figured out that you could make a garlic press for $9.99 or $19.99. What you may end up needing to do is needing to set your deal price to match whatever the top seller's price is, and then use advertising to really get that product showing and liquidate through that approach. That's something that we've seen work, where you basically reverse engineer the best seller and then say, well, would I be able to compete if I had my price that low? Often the answer is yes, and you can make huge liquidations through that approach, assuming the math works out. So you kind of have to do the math beforehand. But I didn't want to just tease liquidations and then not say anything about it, because that's the general playbook we've used. And it's never a fun conversation, but it's a conversation that sometimes needs to happen and can often actually free up a ton of cash for the business, because that inventory sitting in Amazon or sitting in a 3PL or that's cash parked somewhere that you could be deploying into your bestseller instead, or you could be deploying into additional ads to rank your existing products. Like there's trade-off that you're not making by not liquidating. And so we try to at least empathetically suggest that we liquidate this product, get the cash back, and use it for something better for the business.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think a lot, just to add another tack onto that, or maybe a perspective onto what you were saying, is there are certain times, unfortunately, where you do end up with those overstocked. And I agree. Our experience has been very similar. It's like when you thought a product was going to move quicker than it is, and then you ordered a potential product, and then maybe it didn't move as quickly as you thought, the market had shifted, or whatever the case may be. you ended up with the stock. There also is a scenario in which you have to factor in the long-term storage fee impact on profitability. So I've had conversations, and a lot of our clients are quite savvy with their numbers. And so they'll come in and say, okay, I understand I'll have to liquidate it for X. I'm technically losing even and not even fully recuperating product costs. However, factoring in long-term storage fees, it actually is it's better for me to do it this way versus having to sit with those storage fees for too long, because that's going to be astronomical. And so now, again, that is a factor. You need to, again, just to have a black and white conversation. It requires sitting down with the spreadsheet. It requires understanding your numbers, but just sort of look at, in spreadsheets, you can play with multiple scenarios. So I would highly recommend you do that. Build out, what does it look like this? What does it look like that? Is there a way? And then the benefit is, if you have sort of those multiple scenarios built out, then okay, so if A doesn't work, well, I can try B and then D, because those ones, maybe A was my best shot, but conversion rates didn't change as much as I thought when I only did coupons. I didn't do advertising. So now let's see what adding in advertising is. And then that's probably a conversation for another day. But
that's a great point, though. Just scenario planning different options and not just having one make or break option is another great thing to do. And to build on your point, this is the perfect time to test it, because you have 7 days instead of 2. So
yes, absolutely.
Like, you could just run day after day incremental increases in your discounts and potentially get a huge boost in sales and potentially liquidate a product that may or may not be tying up a ton of cash for you.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's a fantastic conclusion to the conversation. So, long story short, treat this like a probably slower moving, longer duration fall Prime Day, I would say, is probably about what we're expecting to go into it. Again, use the learnings that you have from past days, which means coupons are going to be huge. Making sure you're adjusting your advertising is huge. And yeah, what did they say? Good luck, everyone.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
That's the word I was looking for. May the odds
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate this conversation. It's been very, very helpful. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So by the time this comes out, we should have our first few videos live on YouTube. We're just in the middle of creating a YouTube channel where we share a lot of different innovative tutorials for Amazon sellers. And then we do have an agency, stonesgoods.com. You can find us there. But yeah, check out our YouTube. We're really excited about it. Want to start giving back to the community. And yeah, this is one of the inspirations. Like, your show is one of the inspirations for us getting on YouTube as well. So thank you for having us back. Really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully it was valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So check out the links in the descriptions. And yeah, we'll see you in the next recording.